Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 6th of June 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, questions, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. Email mailbox@cynicalbrit.com with your topics for future shows, and I would encourage you guys to have some E3-themed emails over the next few days, since those will be the ones that get the priority. The game in the background is the one and only Duke Nukem 3D, i.e. the proper one. And yes, I am only playing it on Come Get Some. Why? Have you ever played Damn I'm Good? It's pretty much the same as Come Get Some, only enemies keep respawning all the time, which is incredibly annoying. It's like playing Nuketown free-for-all, if you want a comparison to a current, not-so-great game. This one comes in from Anonymous, who says, I recently bought StarCraft 2 and played like 20 games against the AI to get some basic game knowledge, then I jumped into the placements. After winning all 5 of the placement matches, I got placed in the Platinum League. The problem is I don't think I belong in Platinum League. I am by no means a bad gamer. I've achieved 1,900 PSR in HON, 2,700 plus arena rating in WoW, and played Counter-Strike 1.6 at a decent level. But already, the first game after the placement matches, I got crushed by some other Platinum player. Right now, I'm 3 for 3 in stats after placement games. I think my biggest problem is I don't know what armies counter what, etc. Which I think everyone at Platinum should know, and last they checked you were gold when I saw your StarCraft 2 VODs, but you've got a lot more knowledge than me and should be higher ranking. So my question really is, do you think the placement system works as intended, or do you think everyone should start at bronze and work their way up? Well, I don't think the placement system per se works as intended, but the thing is, if you keep losing in plat, you'll find yourself back down to gold pretty damn quickly, and you will keep falling back to the level. The thing is, there's no possible way for the game to determine how good you are after 5 matches. If you cheese all of your 5 matches, by the way, you can end up in platinum, and that won't make you platinum skilled. I mean, hell, you could learn how to 6-pool, find 5 guys that don't know how to deal with 6-pools properly, win 5 matches, and that doesn't mean you're actually a skilled player, but the point is that when you play enough games, the system will get an idea of what kind of skill you have to be. 5 games isn't actually enough, but I don't think they really could have put too many more in there. People would have just got annoyed by it. So enjoy your Platinum League time, and hey, if you rapidly get better, then you get to stay there. But the chances are you will go down to a more suitable league. And bear in mind that if you keep losing, you'll end up playing gold and maybe even silver players anyway before they move you down. So it's not a big deal really. I don't think the placement system works as well as it could, but I don't really see a way of it working better. Everyone starting in Bronze League seems to be fairly unreasonable, particularly when you consider that quite a few people have Smurf accounts, so they will end up doing their placements, and if they ended up in Bronze League, then you just have some massive ruffle stomping going on in the Bronze League as the system tried to get an idea of how good this guy actually was, and then he'd start bumping him through the leagues, and I think that's actually a worse system than what we've got right now. There is nothing ideal about the system, but then again, I don't see any way to do it better, so it's reasonable to stick with, and the system will get an idea about your skill level in time once you've played enough games. It just can't do it after 5. One comes in from Gus that says, my question is regards to your Duke Nukem Forever video, in which you highlighted issues that seem to prevent that game from being a true Duke Nukem game. Duke Nukem is of a genre, along with Serious Sam and Painkiller, that is all about killing enemies with multiple weapons, which are both varied and fun to use, without having to worry too much about the way that you're doing it, and having a brilliant time. However, this type of game seems to be dying out, which is a great shame. As you said, even Bulletstorm didn't quite scratch the itch, but was a step in the right direction. I was a big fan of the first Serious Sam, and I enjoyed the second. The charm of those games comes from being able to have fun without worrying about taking cover, having to regenerate health, or giving up one great weapon for another in the interest of tactics. I don't dislike the trend of realism in modern shooters, but I've enjoyed many tactical shooters in the past, and it also seems like upcoming games like Battlefield 3 will handle a realistic approach rather well. However, surely there is still room for a few fun, gung-ho shooters in modern gaming. I was wondering what your opinion of other games with a similar attitude to Duke Nukem games, such as Serious Sam, particularly the upcoming Serious Sam 3, whose tagline is no cover all man, seems pretty promising. Am I just being nostalgic, or were those games just incredibly fun, and do they still hold true to this day and to the modern gamer? Well, you can see in the background, I haven't played Duke for quite a long time, and I was like, hey, I'm going to play Duke Nukem 3D, and I was trying to remember, oh god, I can't remember the last time I actually played the game properly anyway. You know, I've dabbled in it a bit, but I know I beat the game many years ago. But just that first level reminds me of how many secrets and alternative paths there are to actually get through that. And this is Duke, and Duke's supposed to be a fairly dumb game, but the level design, I think, is the biggest deal. So many games right now are completely linear in terms of their level design, whereas things like Duke and, of course, Doom and Quake and things like that back in the day, they had a more complex level design whereby you could get through it multiple ways. Hell, in Duke, if you want, there's a way to beat the level incredibly fast, and indeed the par time for the level is extremely low. All you need to do is get up to the cinema screen, turn on the cinema screen, shoot through the screen with the RPG, grab the jetpack, and then jet boost up to the button at the top of the level, and then press it. And you can do that incredibly fast. It's not the optimal way to do it if you want to get all the secrets and things like that, which is what I'm trying to do in the background right here, but it's there. That's the main thing. It's the fact that that option is actually there. Deus Ex, another prime example. Admittedly, I think it's maybe unfair to compare any shooter to Deus Ex in terms of the amount of varying routes and things like that, because it's more of an FPS RPG, and the level design in that game is second to none. But that's certainly something that I think could be done a lot better. And while Serious Sam does sound really, really good, in terms of, hey, you know, just shoot a bunch of stuff, it's not all about that. Yes, there's a lot of enemies, and that's what I do like about older shooters. Older shooters don't get scared of putting loads of enemies in front of you without a turret section or some kind of tank. It's like, in the first level, they'll have rooms with 5 or 6 guys in them, no problem. They'll just keep throwing enemies at you, and that's fine. That's a really good thing, and that's actually something that Duke Nukem Forever's demo definitely didn't give me. Bear in mind, it is a demo, and it's also an old demo. That's the demo they've been showing on convention floors for a while, which is also very disappointing. I would have hoped for a proper demo as opposed to that one. But in that demo, you never really engage more than 1 to 2 enemies at a time, with the exception of the turret section. Did you see that? I'm sure you did. Like, oh, you have a turret, suddenly throw a wave of enemies at you. It's a shooting gallery. It's a pointless monster box. And I'm not a fan of that, whereas Duke 3D, even on the first level, has no problem with that. It is good to be able to shoot a lot of enemies. But that's not the only thing. And that's actually one of the problems that I do have with Serious Sam. While I like the game quite a bit, especially in co-op, a lot of it is just like, oh, loads and loads and loads of enemies and just holding the fire button down. And that's not all that cool. And it's also the same deal with Painkiller, actually. Painkiller is really awesome, but it's also just a set of arenas, to the point where they actually lock the doors down until you've killed everything in them, for the most part. There's not a huge amount of exploration in that game, and while it is a bit retro, it's still lacking a lot of the level design principles. I mean, Painkiller's quite old now, but it's certainly not as old as Duke 3D or Doom or Quake or anything along those lines. That's the thing that I think that developers really need to get back to. Proper level design. And I do mean proper level design. Not being scared to allow people to find secrets and to skip parts of their level. I think that game developers are way too selfish these days. They said, oh, you're not allowed to skip this bit because we want to show you this. Look at what our art team did. Look at what we spent $100,000 doing with mocap. It's like, I don't care. Yeah, screw your cutscenes. Let me explore the level. Crysis 2 did this fairly well. Even though Crysis 2 is linear, at least it had a lot of large open areas that you could approach in different ways, even if it was still sort of a cloaked linear progression. It was still pretty damn awesome. I would just like to see more games go back to the old school method of level design in shooters as opposed to what we have right now. I just feel like I'm on a guided tour most of the time, and hell, a lot of modern shooters barely let you play them. It's like, oh great, another segment where I'm not allowed to control my character, or I'm forced to walk, or I can't get my gun out, it won't let me do that because it doesn't want me to. Oh god, gotta sit through this conversation. Yeah, let's have some more Half-Lives and Duke Nukem 3Ds as opposed to Black Ops and Homefront. That would be wonderful. This one comes in from Sven, who says, since 4 months ago or so, I quit WoW. This gave me time to play some other games, you can imagine. Now, I've been playing these games I had on the shelf, but I never really got the time to play, in particular Half-Life 2, Darksiders, Crysis, and some Call of Duty games. Now, I noticed when playing Darksiders and Half-Life 2, I got really dizzy, motion sickness maybe. I searched on the internet and some other people were having this issue with these particular games. I've also read somewhere that this could have something to do with the field of view. The low field of view these games have seems something like tunnel vision. Now, as someone who's played a lot of games, I never really had these symptoms in any other games of all genres I've played, so I find it kind of strange it's happening with newer games. Since you're someone who's very experienced with games, I would be interested to hear if you've had any experience with this and what you think causes it. Also, do you think that this is something that game designers should really take a look at? This is an issue that can really impair the pleasure of a game if you're restricted to playtime in this game, just because you're feeling kind of sick and dizzy after half an hour. Usually it's a field of view issue. I have this issue with some modern games. They're pretty much mostly console ports. It's very curious, I might add, that you said Half-Life 2 and Darksiders caused this issue, and yet not Call of Duty. Because Call of Duty's single player, particularly Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops, as well as games like Medal of Honor, and also a lot of other console ports like, say, Resident Evil 5, caused me those kind of issues. I have quite a large monitor. I sit fairly close to it because it's optimal for doing my work. You know, I have this 30-inch Dell, and it's very handy for doing video editing on. It's good for precision, but at the same time, it can be a little bit of a pain to play games that were designed for console on. The thing about field of view is that console games are designed to be played on a television that is a significant distance away from you, and as a direct result of that, it's not so optimal to have a wide field of view there, as opposed to if you're sitting closer to the screen, then you want a wider field of view, because otherwise you can get that motion sickness effect. I said, I've had a problem with Resident Evil there. That was particularly bad, actually. Resident Evil 5 has a really tight field of view, and that's by design as well. They want it to be more claustrophobic. In my case, it just makes me motion sick, so I'm not a huge fan of that one. And I've never actually had a problem with Half-Life 2, but it is possible to change the FOV via the console, if I recall, and if not, certainly some of the INI files. What I would say is that more games need to have an FOV option, because the ability to change field of view is very much a personal comfort thing, and I don't think it's something that developers should have the right to restrict. Darksiders is a curious one, because that's a third-person game, and I've never really had a FOV issue with a third-person game. Mostly just FPS, but I suppose it is possible. Oddly enough, one of the things Treyarch got right with Black Ops was the ability to change the field of view for multiplayer, not single-player, but multiplayer, in the menu options. Now, it wasn't quite as wide as I would like. It's got a maximum allowed field of view of 80. Which kind of sucks. I prefer 90, honestly. It is certainly a personal preference, and I was very thankful that Bad Company 2 allowed you to change the field of view in the INI files to whatever the hell you want. Hell, you could actually set it up so far that it would fisheye around the side because you had an unnatural amount of peripheral vision there. But there's one other thing to bear in mind, and this is why, more often than not, this problem is present in console ports. It's that a more limited field of view also means that the game is rendering less assets on the screen at any given time, which is often one of the ways, and indeed one of the tricks, that developers get more power out of a console, which is, of course, hardware that's a good 5 or 6 years old now, so they're still trying to keep up with the modern graphics standards on hardware that hasn't changed for 5 or 6 years. It's not good, and that's why games like Modern Warfare and a lot of shooters on console, and as a direct result when they're ported over, often keep this feature, which is unnecessary on a modern gaming PC and actually very uncomfortable, have a very limited field of view. Those of you who want to read more about field of view or just don't understand what all the fuss is about, I've put a good link to a blog in the description below this video. It's got some good information and some screenshot comparisons of what I'm talking about. And this one comes in from Lewis that says, with multiplayer now the dependent variable that a game apparently needs to succeed in this current generation, the single-player stories in most games are ignored. It seems that the gaming community does nothing but moan and complain if a hyped game with great potential pedigree does not have a multiplayer option. Perfect example of this is the up-and-coming Batman Arkham City. This title's predecessor was the best game of 2009 as far as I'm concerned, and the opinion of the BAFTA Awards as well. This game did not have multiplayer because it's story-driven, and of course the word Batman is the title's main selling point. After Eidos' decision recently not to include multiplayer in the sequel, I looked on forums and read many vulgar responses to this news, as a majority of posts wanted multiplayer in the game. Why would Eidos need to include multiplayer? A perfect example to support Eidos' decision is Mass Effect 2. Single-player story, no multiplayer, but a huge success. What are your thoughts on gaming's evolution over the last decade, and do you share my view that multiplayer is now the main selling point of a game, rather than a game story? To some people, yes. And you want to know why? Because they want to be the very best. And they can't be the very best if there's no multiplayer for them to gain ranks in and be Master Sergeant Shooter Person of Extreme Awesome or whatever. I'm not going to blame Call of Duty because this was happening way before. I remember the complaints about Quake, actually. It's like, oh my god, Quake 3 doesn't have a proper single player, and of course Quake 3 turned out to be an extremely successful and highly respected multiplayer title, and still is to this day in the form of Quake Live. But it would be nice to see a Quake 5 with a decent story. Quake 4 was alright, but not amazing. You know, in my opinion, it's down to the whole metagaming argument. I'm okay with people wanting to get the most out of their games, and I don't personally care for achievements, for instance, but I understand why people pursue them, because they want to be the very best, and in that case, they want to just get everything and be completionists and stuff like that, but it's now extended to multiplayer and the desire to have multiplayer in every game, just so that they can try and be competitive. That's my opinion of it anyway. That's how I view a lot of people that ask for multiplayer in inappropriate games, like, oh, you know, I'm going to be the best player of multiplayer Batman Arkham City or whatever in the world, and I'm going to play from day one, I'm going to get competitive, I'm going to get all the pre-order bonuses, I'm going to get... It's like... God, that's not what gaming is all about. The last thing that I want to see in a good single-player game is development time wasted on shoehorned multiplayer. And more often than not, that it is shoehorned multiplayer. There's tons of examples of games that have really bad multiplayer, but had really good single-player, and sometimes it compromises the game, and sometimes it doesn't. And then you've got to wonder, well, why exactly is this in the game when they could have added more to the single-player? The Darkness, great example. Really good game, highly underrated in my opinion, absolutely fantastic. It has multiplayer. Does anyone play it? No. What about, say, Stranglehold? There's an example of a game which, as far as I'm concerned, suffered because of the inclusion of multiplayer. Game, far too short. Otherwise, damn awesome. Really, really fun shooter. I enjoyed Stranglehold so much. And how much more content could they have put in the game if they hadn't wasted time with the multiplayer? Another example, the newest Wolfenstein game. I loved that game to death, and I will in fact defend it to my grave. But the multiplayer actually got developed by another company and was tacked on garbage. So for God's sake, developers, please, we want good single player. Don't shoehorn in multiplayer unless it makes sense. If it was there from the very start in the design, fine. No problem at all. But most of the time, games that have shoehorned multiplayer definitely do not benefit from it. There are tons more examples, and hell, it would take me hours to get through them all. Ladies and gentlemen, my name has been Totalbiscuit. Thanks for watching the Mailbox today. Remember to email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com. I'll see you next time.